For the dot to dots, we initially got told to get into a pair and choose one point on the body and make a line with our finger around to another part of the body. So you could start on one shoulder blade and go to the other, or maybe start on an ankle and go all the way up to the forehead. We started off really simple and just going straight there, and we had 3 movements each, and you'd do the first 3, then the second 3. Then to layer up, we made them slightly different. So the lines, instead of being directly connected, they'd go in a more obscure route. So if you're going from one shoulder blade to the other, you might go around the other way completely, all like over their chest and around again. Or you might go in a bit of like a U shape instead, like down to the bottom of their back and back up. Just make it a bit different. We then got told to rearrange the order, so instead of going one person do 3, then the other person do 3, just completely switch the order. So it could be that order, or you could go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, or whatever order we felt like, just to make it a bit more interesting. We then got told that each of us had to have some movement in which we went under the other person, whether that be under an arm, under a leg, or any sort of thing like that. But only the person going under was able to move the other person. So if you wanted to go under the arm, the person with their arm going under couldn't just move their arm up by themselves. The person going under had to physically move their arm around them, which made it look quite interesting. We then got told to add a lift in, but it had to be where it felt natural rather than just randomly anywhere. So if you were in a perfect position in which you were going under an arm and you could just pick them up from there, then that would be one. But we weren't allowed to do it in which it would be really hard to get into a position in which you could lift. Then we kept repeating them to learn them. And the final thing that got added was a movement bit in the middle. So we had to have something in which one person would move the other person a few steps. And then we did that, and then just before we all got into a circle and showed each other it, he said that we'd have different places in which we'd look. So whether it be having eye contact, having one person looking at the other and that person looking away, or both people looking away, or both people looking at the same point, just to experiment a bit with what it was like. In this video, it was really interesting because we were experimenting with the pace of it. So to start off with, they go quite slowly, and it's just quite interesting the way that Imogen moves, and it's quite graceful in a way. And then it slowly adapts later on when Izzy's told that she has to grab Imogen instead, and it makes it look quite controlling the way it's done. And then later on again, around here, so here he is telling Imogen to look away, but for Izzy to look at Imogen, whereas Izzy's still doing really strong grips and not letting them go. This makes it seem really interesting, as it seems really controlling, as if Imogen doesn't want to be there and Izzy's forcing her to stay there and not letting her get away. We thought that this would be really good to use for when we're going to do our big performance together. And keep this in mind if we ever needed to do something to do with relationships or anything, to create that sense of controlling and uncomfortableness for the audience, I guess, as watching it. It's quite awkward and you don't really want to think about what might be going on outside the relationship. This second video, it was about the introduction of props. So here Hannah has a little paper aeroplane, and it was just the experimentation of what that might add to it. So Hannah's looking at the aeroplane, but Bella's looking at Hannah. So it's just quite interesting seeing that aspect of it. So rather than Hannah looking just away, she's looking at an object. And it's the extra added layer, I guess, that makes it seem so interesting, and it allows the audience to put a story onto it. and it allows the audience to project whatever they think it might be. So some people came out with thinking it was a mother and a child, or I think at this point he opens up the paper and then it starts seeming like a wife and a husband, and he's focusing on work whereas she's very much focusing on him, and it's that one-way relationship kind of thing that's happening throughout the entire thing when you see it with the object, because it's considerably less controlling because of the grips and because she's still focusing, especially here when Hannah doesn't move very much and she's doing the least amount of work possible. It's very interesting just to see the fact that she's focusing so much on this paper instead of on her partner. And then on this final one, it's experimenting in the staging. So here, while we started doing it standing up, they had to then learn how to do it on the floor. It just seemed very, very interesting because my mind initially went to in bed, like as a relationship. But some people saw it more, I think, of cloud gazing or something like that. It's just very interesting hearing all the different versions that everyone came out with. Because with pieces like this, when there's no story that the people, like the actors, have had originally, it's very much the audience's perspective on it. And it's the audience's decision of the story. So whatever movement might be happening, the audience always thinks of a reason for it and thinks of a story behind it. At this point, Bruce is looking away and then it seems very much one-sided again. And if it is in bed as a relationship, it's very awkward in a sense because it almost seems non-consensual in a way. The fact that Bruce seems like he doesn't want to be there, but he's still doing all the things that he has to. I think later on it gets really quick and it just looks really interesting, the fact that like it's all this thing and like the movement happens so quick and it adds that extra layer of thinking about the speed of all the movements. So while you can change the eye contact and all the more complicated things, when it comes down to it, the speed is what changes it the most. Because if they go really slowly, then it would be quite interesting to see what that would look like, because I think it would look a lot more romantic. Whereas I think when it's quite fast, it just seems a bit rushed and unnecessary in a way. And then in this one, it was about the absence of people. So it started off with Jade being there, and it seemed really interesting with it all. And then Jade got taken out of it later on, and it was Marlon doing it on his own here. And it allowed the audience to come up with so many different reasons for that. So some people had it for if it was like the death of his wife or something. But then because Jade comes back later, some people thought he might be a child that's gone off to university or gone to their own home. And then they've come back maybe at the end of Marlon's life. Or some people thought if Jade did die, then it's when she comes back, it's like they've both gone to the afterlife and they can meet each other again. So it's just these small changes allow for such variation in the story, because before, like, anything had changed and it was just a simple dot-to-dot exercise. Well, a lot of stories came out of it, the difference in the stories and the difference in the audience's perspective of it only really fully came out because of all the changes. And that was it for the dot-to-dot exercise. I think it's really useful and really helpful thinking about the layering aspect of it all and how the slightest little thing changing can completely change the story. And while the actors may not have a story to begin with, the audience will always put one onto it. So when we devise our final piece, we don't necessarily have to put a story onto it straight away, but we can just mess about with the movements, and then once we figure out what it might look like at the end, maybe put that story a bit more onto it, so have the facial expressions and maybe the costume that goes along with it.